Welcome to Coastside Poetry. Thank you all for joining us on this lovely afternoon. I'm Diane Lee Moomey with Steve Long co-hosting. It's Sunday, July 25th, and here we are at an extra July event, another salon. A new kind of salon for us, Book Talk. Today, we'll look at Blue Light Press's most recent release, the anthology Fog and Light. This program is being recorded and is live streaming on YouTube as we speak. We're so glad you could all tune in. In Fog and Light, San Francisco through the eyes of the poets who live here, editor Diane Frank of Blue Light Press has compiled a dynamic collection of poems. She'll be joined by four of the contributors, Catherine Harrer, Stuart Florsheim, Kathy Evans, and Catherine Goldman. We look forward to hearing some poems by each and a lively discussion among the poets about their own poetry, processes, and choices, about the experience of being part of an anthology and whatever other poetic topics arise. Both Zoom room and live stream participants are invited to post questions at any time in the chat box. We'll address those in the Q&A, along with live questions from our Zoom room audience. And now, please welcome Diane, Catherine, Kathy, Stuart, and Catherine. Diane, would you like to introduce your poets? You're muted, Diane.
I thought that since you've introduced the books, we might just introduce the poets by having them read. So they're poems from the book, because the book is about the poets that are in there and our vision of San Francisco from the inside, not the tourist version, the vision by people who have lived in San Francisco and now live in San Francisco.
Absolutely, that's wonderful, great. Okay.
So I don't know if you have a particular order of how you want people to read, or, okay, well then let's start with Catherine Goldman. She has a view of, you know, having grown up in one of the neighborhoods, she has a view of San Francisco that no one else in the book shared as well. You know, that's the thing that I love about this book, is that everyone has their own view, their own experience, and it's all from the inside.
Thanks, Diane. I'm a native San Franciscan, so I have a lot of investment. When Diane contacted me and asked me to contribute, I was a bit humbled and thinking, my stuff? And she has just highlighted how unique my perspective is, and I never think of it that way. So it's really a pleasure to have an opportunity to share my history of the city with you all. I have two pieces I'm going to read. One is a poem and one is more of a short story. 3rd Street Cowboys. I grew up in the San Francisco of immigrants. Color and language took a back seat to survival. Victory Garden backyards provided an arsenal against the hunger of dock strikes. Italians on one side, Mexicans on the other, Maltese, Irish, and Portuguese down the street. We bought salted cod for bacala from Mr. Chan at the corner grocery store. My grandmother's Italian backyard of produce, chard, tomatoes, zucchini, a canopy of fig, apple, and pear trees. Sunday dinner chickens in the coop. What we could not use, we shared. Anne and June, my next door best friends, were twin daughters of a Baptist minister who served the Bayview district with hallelujah praises to the Lord. 3rd Street, one border of Butchertown, was lined with slaughterhouses, connected by train tracks, our country's meat warehouse. Saturday mornings with my father on the 3rd Street Bridge, greeting South American cargo ships, watching their long-horned passengers disembark, cowboys with lassos and chaps astride red and black quarter horses, clomping down 3rd Street, leading steer to their slaughter. The San Francisco I live in now is occupied by citizens of Starbucks, Pete's, or Phil's, heads down, mesmerized by a screen. I feel like my grandparents, an immigrant in a strange new land, a San Francisco baron of Victory Gardens, 3rd Street cowboys, and Mr. Chan. Thank you. This next piece I wrote, in San Francisco, we were pretty inventive. We used what we had in the neighborhood to entertain ourselves. And this is a little story about one of the things that we did that was a little bit, I think now, death-defying. The Colby Street Slalom Skiers. When I was 8, we lived on a cloud-kissing hill in San Francisco that descended into a bustling T intersection. Using this backdrop for their reasoning, my parents told me I would not be getting a bike for my birthday because it was unsafe to ride on the streets near our house. As visions of a cherry red Schwinn faded into a tangled traffic at the end of our block, I invented a remedy to my disappointment. Organizing a group of my fellow bikeless friends, we hiked up to the top of our street. Each of us carried a metal roller skate. Looking down over our urban vista, we discussed potential courses, velocity, and escape routes. Then we began our construction. Opening our skates to their longest length, each one of us carefully positioned a flat board 6 inches wide by 18 inches long across our own expanded skate and firmly wedged it between the toe and heel clips. Everything was secured in place by tightening the wing nut on the underside of the thin metal skate. The finished products look like a short-armed cross with wheels. Sitting dead center on our boards, with our legs stretched straight out in front of us, we leaned into the power of gravity and surrendered to the steep slope, using only our hands on the edges of the board to steer. Like Olympic slalom skiers, we slided over the slidewalk, weaving in and out of driveways, navigating the concrete and asphalt moguls with charmed agility. The true test of our skills was making the sharp left-hand turn into Mr. Gimignani's bushes on the corner to avoid being catapulted into the heavy cross traffic at the bottom of the hill. After earning our bruises, we all mastered the art of flying in the face of fear. I can't say the same for Mr. Gimignani's bushes. Epilogue. I never owned a bike, but as an adult, I took up hang gliding. Thank you.
Before, before starting this book and gathering the poems, I already knew about these two prose poems by Catherine because she sometimes takes workshops with me, and I had to have them in the book.
So thank you so much, Catherine, for reading that. Thank you.
Thank you for including me.
So our next poet is Catherine Harrer with 3 poems, which I just love.
Thank you, Diane. Can you all?
Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you, Diane. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Before I start, I just have to tell Catherine Goldman that I also grew up in the city, and I also was not allowed to ride a bike because the hills were too steep. And we also used to sit on our skates. So it just brought it all back. That's great. I'm going to start with the 3rd poem of mine in the book. And of course, it's just come out of its little place where it was marked. There it is. And I also just want to say, when I saw that Diane was doing this book, I jumped on it because, as somebody who grew up in the city and lived there most of my life and has, seen it change, but still love it, I wanted so much to be included because I had been writing a lot about San Francisco. So I'm really grateful to Diane for giving all of us the opportunity to have our poems included. So this is called Love Note to San Francisco. And if you have the book and like to follow along, it's on page 93. Love Note to San Francisco. Our base in a game of tag, 1 foot on the city, and we're safe. The J Church, the 10 Monterey. One took me to ballet, the other brought me home. The closed forever emporium, a Ferris wheel on its roof, giddy in the sky over Market Street. Childhood dioramas standing us next to our mothers and our best friends, bobby pins from Woolworths in our flyaway hair. Now it's a playground for wealth. They take our parking places, but not our Jimmy the Butcher stories. Free slices of salami for the girl who danced by. The city is still our main game. We want it to remember us, to call us home, the way our parents called us into dinner from the hide and seek of the streets. I felt like I was reading to Catherine, because you grew up probably around the same time I did in the city. This next poem is called All Without Leaving Union Square, and it's a very different poem than the first one I read. I read an article in the Chronicle back in January of 2019, and it was all about all the cool places you could get cocktails in Union Square and how amazing the cocktails were. And for some reason, it pissed me off. I just got really upset. And I thought, there's more to it than that, even though I like cocktails. You know, as my friend Kathy Evans knows, I like cocktails a lot, but it got me going. So what I did is I took phrases from her review and I interwove them with things that I had experienced or seen in Union Square during my life. So All Without Leaving Union Square is actually from her review. Like, you can do everything you want in San Francisco and you don't even have to leave. And as I say in the epigraph, there's excerpts from an article in the Chronicle by Maggie Hoffman, and I called her cocktail reviewer, but I'm not sure if that's her real title. Long considered a wasteland of department stores and bland high-rise hotels, Union Square has become a hotbed of aperitivi. Chic and hip, you can bring your out-of-town relations to elegant cocktail lounges where every night new drinks are born. Sprayed with tarragon oil, garnished with fresh mint, soothed in pineapple syrup, and wallowing in aged pot-stilled Irish whiskey at $72 a bottle. You can sit in candlelit corners of high-rise hotel bars, laughing over multi-layered cocktails with quirky names. And it's 48 degrees in Union Square tonight, and someone will freeze to death holding a pint of cheap vodka in her arms. While crushed ice is sprayed with fennel tea syrup, licked with Fernet, as the bartender slicks a glass with 18-year-old single malt scotch, someone's head is in a trash can fishing for sandwich rinds and pizza crusts. Tourist buses blare, hawkers hawk tickets to Alcatraz. The women in black walk up Powell Street on Black Friday. Hungry natives stare out from benches in an absinthe rinse, steps stealthily over our tight and human square. And those are some pretty exotic cocktails. Thank you. My last poem, which has been around for a long time, is called Why I Like Graffiti. And I call it a personal manifesto, and I dedicated it when I wrote it to Jack Hirschman. Because we're not supposed to do it. Because buildings are holy, billboards precious, walls worth more than gold. Because we're not supposed to do it. Touch their buildings, climb their fences, hang like a bird from their roofs, leave our mark. Because it's there for everyone to see. No museum guards to track you, no fish-eyed lady collecting your entrance fee to another airless palace of legitimate art. No cultural dues to pay to prove you can look, and if you're young and the wrong color and lively, you're asked to leave, ushered into the street where you belong. because it's out there in the breathable air framed by the sky and the hustle. Curved Hebraic letters of tags, peaceful bombings, murals, full-scale pieces, mesmerizing fences, charm bracelets across eyesore alleys, nonviolent violence, without laying out a dime to the gods of advertising, right under the noses of the civic censors, late at night on a bicycle, a backpack full of paint, art where it belongs, where we can see it. Because when I look at graffiti, I know what I would make with my spray can nozzle, my paintbrush, my broad-tipped marker. Women's faces, all kinds, in repose, hilarious, tragic, divine, girls and crones, so we can see ourselves, not on the oil slicks of billboards singing for whiskey or cigarettes or love, but floating across a vacant lot on Harrison, pressed into the abandoned walls of a brewery south of Market, high styling an office building, meditating on the financial district, its spilled curbs and unopened windows, on financiers, laborers, and the dispossessed, real women looking us straight in the eye. And in spite of the aneurysms of culture, the instinct to close the door, turn up the heat, and die peacefully with what I already know, graffiti makes me love the streets again. Wild horses, Malcolm X, whimsical dogs, urgent signs, kids screaming their names because we're not supposed to do it. Make the cemented world ours.
Catherine, thank you so much. I just love that poem. I love all of your poems. And one of the things that I just adore about these readings that we're doing is that it makes the book come alive. Poetry and the voices of the poet who wrote it, it's a whole different animal and it's beautiful.
I want to go out and buy a spray can now.
This is reminding me of some things from my past. So our next poet is Kathy Evans. One of the things I just love about Kathy's poems, the two poems in this book are not long. They're less than a page, but where she goes in that space is just astounding. I wish that more poets knew how to do what Kathy does in a smaller space where every line comes alive and she tells an amazing story each time. Kathy, you're on. And you can unmute yourself.
There. Am I on?
You are.
Oh, good. Thank you. Kudos to you, Diane, for putting this book together. It's really, truly one of my favorite of all poetry books because it's unpretentious and it shines so many angles on the city and it makes you want to just dive back into the city. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me, right? Okay. Well, I will read the two poems and I will just say I've always thought it would be a wondrous event to have buildings that were completely white in a city. The whole city was just white buildings and the graffiti artists could just come in and do their thing and cover each other up and then do their thing. So thank you, Catherine, for that poem and for this Fog and Light book. I think that the first poem that I will read is a pleasurable poem because I have gone over the years to the San Francisco Ballet and enjoyed my evenings there immensely. And this is about one of those evenings. Ballet practice. Rain in San Francisco, coming down in buckets. My car inching toward another intersection on Franklin. A slow prowl toward fate. I've been at the same stoplight, it seems, for 1,000 years. But Mozart is on the radio. And people outside are pushing black umbrellas up toward the sky, while inside a glass building across the street, bodies fly through the air like finches and leaves. And that's how I saw them on the night of rain. This one is called Questions for Michael, a different tone. Questions for Michael after the fact. Did you wear boots? Anything in your pockets? Which tattoo was the one that identified you? How long had it been since you visited her? How long were you in the water? Had you held anything delicate that day? Did you take BART, then walk? Did you pretend you were a tourist? Was it too bright? Was it a Wednesday? What was the last piece of fruit that you bit into? Did you remember shelling peas out on her back porch? Did you remember building your sister a fence? What did you eat before you left? Nothing? Did you think you could fly? And why just past the midspan? What was your last thought? And did you know your body would float all the way to Angel Island? That was my nephew, and an odd memory of Golden Gate Bridge. But every time I go over it, I think about his suicide. So, and I just wanted to maybe read one more little poem. I lived in the neighborhood of the Fillmore for a while, and I passed a lot of homeless people, which we see, as well as the wealthy in San Francisco. And so I found this little poem today. In the neighborhood, here in the Fillmore, under the freeway over ramp, a homeless man, half out of his thin sleeping bag, rises like larva. He is sitting up in the sunshine and reading a Tom Clancy novel, his green toothbrush in an empty water glass next to a communion candle sitting on a rock. White plastic bags blowing in from the dollar store. He calls out, "Good morning, ma'am." And I think he means it. So thank you. Thank you for listening. And I also value being invited to this reading.
Thank you so much for joining us. Those were wonderful.
Kathy, I just, your poem about the ballet fills me with joy, and your poem about your cousin, it just devastates me. I mean, I'm listening just this afternoon and I have tears in my eyes. And, for those of us who live in San Francisco, it's beautiful if there's not too much traffic, which is not usual to drive across the Golden Gate Bridge. I always love it. I can do something I can do over and over and again and still love it. But this other thing, I think most of us have been on the bridge while we're waiting for the fire department to try to talk someone down. And it's just part of living in San Francisco. I did include one poem by a tourist, Marcia Nelson, who's a poet and took a summer workshop here with me a few years ago, about her discovering the Golden Gate Bridge for the first time. I thought that was something she could do better than a tourist, better than a native. But, it's just that your poem really means a lot to me. Okay, our next poet is Stuart Florsheim. You're on, Stuart.
Hey, Diane, thank you so much for inviting me to the reading. Thank you, Diane Mooney, for having, this event. And thank you, Steve, for being the critical tech guy. Just to give you a little bit of context, I'm originally from New York, but I've been living in the Bay Area for, I think, over 40 years. I've probably lived in San Francisco for, I'd say about 20 years. And now I live in the East Bay, very, very close to Berkeley. So I'm going to read a couple of the poems I have in Fog and Light, and then I'm going to read one more poem that's a new poem that is also based in San Francisco. The first poem I'm going to read is called Rush Hour. How can it be, the mother scolding her 5-year-old daughter for not listening to her, while the three of them sit on the ground in the Montgomery Street BART station, the woman, the girl, the infant, their red Carl's Jr. box filled with loose change. How can it be, the daughter whimpering, her head lowered, as though her mother had just scolded her in the living room of their apartment, the TV blaring the 5 o'clock news. How can it be the infant wrapped up in a pink blanket, asleep in her mother's arms, while the rain drips into a puddle inches from her head? How can it be this, the life we have chosen? To rush home after seeing this, to walk through the front door, to sit down at the kitchen table, to eat. This, after the mother, with all the strength in her tiny voice, it's time, Kathy, for a time out. The next poem from the book is called Reverie. During lunch at Hunan Homes, scallops and black bean sauce, sizzling rice that seems to quiet us, you say, we should have gotten married. Words that fill us, then make us hungry. Not that we would have been good together, but for a few moments we share our longing. The way the conductor walked up and down the train this morning, advising passengers how to fulfill their goals, and they listened. Or the way the big oak stood over Horse Mountain, and you used to run up to it to watch the colts run by those winter afternoons. Timing was against us, I say. Call it your anger after a failed marriage, or my fear that we were getting too close. Even as the horses walk by your window and we listen to Chopin Sunday mornings, eating pancakes filled with blackberries from your garden. And the last poem I'm going to read is a new poem. It's called Ushering at the San Francisco Opera. From the end of the long line of patrons waiting for me to escort them to their seats. The Carmen wannabe in the floor-length red chiffon gown, black hair pulled back, fashioned into a bun. The man in a tux walking and reading his program from rose glasses perched on the tip of his nose. My friend Bill shouts to me, "Hey, Stuart, didn't I see you naked at the pool this morning?" Everyone chuckles as I look down to make sure I'm clothed. And then I recall the 200-yard IM we did in our master's group at 6 that morning, my legs still tight because I didn't stretch enough after the swim. Carmen tells me she's a swimmer as well and just completed the 2-mile race from Alcatraz. In fact, everyone shares their exercise routines with me as I escort them to their seats. The woman preparing for her first triathlon, the man trying his hand at boxing, the woman who does Bikram yoga first thing every morning. The lights dim and my patrons appear restless in their seats. When Irene Roberts begins her first aria, the triathlete stretches her arms across her shoulders, imagines the light shimmering on the pool and dives in, one arm stretching out, then pulling the water hard along the length of her long body. She's swimming just above the surface now as she listens to Carmen sing sweetly about love, the rebellious bird that no one can tame. Thanks very much.
Stuart, I love your new poem. I'm so glad you read it. And just so you know, Stuart has 2 books published with Blue Light Press, and Kathy Evans has a book published with Blue Light Press. It seems like a magic power to be able to put a really deserving poet into print. And Heather, who is here in the audience, also has a book with Blue Light Press. Okay, so
one thing I wanted I forgot to mention earlier, and I'd love to hear some poems by you, Diane, but while it's still in my mind, feel free to use the chat to post any links you would like, or any books you would like, or any upcoming readings, anything, because as far as I know, there's no limit to how much the chat will hold. And I'll be saving it at the end, and anyone who wants to, because it's enabled. Save Chat is enabled, so anyone who wants to can save it. So I'd love to see like where to get all your books and what you're all doing and all that. Okay, I'll go quietly now. Sorry.
Thank you, Diane. And Heather, since I'm about to read, if you could just put in the chat bluelightpress@aol.com, I'd really appreciate that. We have, there's a link to Fog and Light. It's our first book that we feature on the page, and you can find all of the poets that we've published. So I'm going to share 3 poems. Along with being a poet, I played cello in the Golden Gate Symphony. A few years ago, our conductor scheduled us to play a concert on Beta Breakers Sunday. He hadn't looked at the calendar. And it's as you all know, it's a crazy race with everybody in costume. And because we live in the outer sunset, the only way to get to this concert, which required crossing the race, was to take 2 cellos on the Enjuta. Mahler on Race Day begins with an epigram by Gustav Mahler. I shall soar upwards to the light which no eye has penetrated. Mahler on Race Day. In concert black, we carry 2 cellos to the Enjuta streetcar on Beta Breakers Sunday to play Mahler's Second Symphony. We take seats in the front of the train next to a unicorn, a dragonfly, runners in rainbow tutus, and a caveman with a leopard Santa Claus hat. Eric's tuxedo, bow tie, and hot pink cummerbund, well, everybody's in costume. We sit across from a furry gray cat and an angel with a red, white, and blue halo. To my left, a couple holding hands and wearing the medals they got when they crossed the finish line. She's dressed like a bumblebee, fuzzy antennas waving from her headband. He carries a bouquet of larger-than-life sunflowers. More people board the streetcar, a 3-eyed alien, a troll with pink hair, human-sized mice and bunnies, a leopard with a fanny pack and a 6-pack. A woman who flew in from Boston tells me that Beta Breakers is her 73rd birthday party. We invite her to the Mahler concert. She started piano lessons at age 66. No mother to tell her the piano won't fit in her house. A family of bumblebees climbs into the streetcar with black antennas and black tutus. One of them tells me the wings helped her up the Hayes Street Hill. Standing in the aisle, butterfly hats, butterfly wings, butterflies. A cello isn't out of place in this crowd. I invite the butterfly to the concert, but she prefers early music. I tell her we played Beethoven's 9th Symphony last year. Beethoven? That's hardly early music. A bear in a fuzzy costume says that Mahler is so much better than the new music concert he heard last weekend. Sirens and pots and pans. The rainbow caterpillar agrees. Mahler has melody, chord structure, immaculate timing, and thundering beauty. Entering the streetcar, metallic space cylinder, svelte runner in orange neon shorts and rainbow snake earrings. Beta Breakers, 7.46 miles, a marathon up and down San Francisco hills, from the Bay Bridge to the Pacific Ocean. Mahler, quite a workout, 27 pages in the cello part. Allegro maestoso at the starting gate. My teacher's advice, at the downbeat, play as fast as you can. Keep running. At Van Ness Station, exit the streetcar, up the stairs, down the street, cross the race at Hayes. Traffic signals help as we weave 2 cellos between the tutus. A few minutes before the call, we find the side door to the Herbst Theatre and a friend who plays French horn for the San Francisco Ballet. Bill says, Mahler's Second Symphony at the Herbst Theatre? Good for you, but is that building large enough to hold that piece? Curtain, conductor, start. It's under my fingers, and I keep intense focus as I play. Waves of beauty and mystery. The soprano soloist was one of the sent down children during the Cultural Revolution in China. She sang to keep herself sane, then emigrated across the Pacific to study opera. The mezzo, a Southern belle, with honey voice and tango flowers in her hair, would do herself honors at Mardi Gras. It's a hauntingly beautiful and mystical piece from the opening run to our standing ovation. After the applause, after we really did this thing, in the aura of post-concert afterglow, time to take cellos back to the outer sunset. On the streetcar, we sit inside a hive of bumblebees. A butterfly takes our photograph, tuxedo and concert black, holding cellos. For the next week, Mahler, a fat moon, and rainbow tutus in my dreams. My next poem, The Sky Away from Here, is about trying to watch a full eclipse of the moon in the outer sunset. We're in the fog belt, and it was pea soup fog that night. The sky away from here. Somewhere the moon turned copper. Druids circled Stonehenge in amber robes. My astronomy professor was on his balcony with a telescope. I was in San Francisco under a thick cloud cover. In the sky away from here, shadows of buffaloes ran across the moon, and coyotes howled their dirge to the dark night. In London, a coven of moon-clad women swept their homes, cooked moon soup, chanted the old stories, wore moonstones. In the Zagros Mountains, Sufis gathered in a stone circle, read Rumi for an oracle, became dervishes at midnight. In Kyoto, a geisha in Pontocho wore a kimono painted with a silk moon, brushed her lover with a feather. And in the Gatsby land of the Long Island beaches, two lovers bathed in a tide pool, using the dark of the moon as a cover. In San Francisco, I entered my dreams as the rain pounded disappointment on my window. But in the sky, away from here, luminous tattoos danced across the sky and shattered into new constellations. The buffalo, the geisha, the feather, a tide pool of lovers on the far side of the moon. And one tiny poem, Earthquake 5 a.m. You have to have poems about earthquakes in a book about San Francisco. One of the things about earthquakes is the way the animals always know how they react both before and after. Earthquake, 5 a.m. Temblor wakes me with a kiss. On the other side of the wall, a whirring of water. I open thin blinds to calla lilies, belladonna, the garden of early morning light. After the earthquake, the neighborhood dogs howl, then a silence that wraps the morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Diane. This has been lovely. Let's see, we're doing really well for time. And there are a couple of questions I wanted to ask. One in particular, kind of aimed at all of you, both Diane and the contributors. what was it like to the group experience of publishing an anthology as opposed to having your own book published, or Diane, as opposed to publishing one poet in a book?
So I'd like to hear from the four poets before I say anything about this. Catherine.
Well, I just think it's a thrill to get to be in a book with so many excellent poets about a topic that's so meaningful to so many of us. So it's almost like we're having a party in there, you know, we're all in there together. And at different times, I discover different poems that I'm excited about. But really, it's just the opportunity to be together, because often poets are isolated, you know, and we're just sitting alone, writing our poems, hoping somebody someday might care. And we get to be together in this book. And so that's my response.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I think the benefit of having an anthology like this is, just like Catherine said, I mean, there's a beauty of, yes, being in a community of poets, but I think also if you have a really interesting, compelling theme, like, San Francisco from the inside out, I think if the poetry is strong, it really, it really speaks strongly to that theme, which can be really exciting to anybody who is interested in San Francisco. I think the downside of doing an anthology is sometimes the poetry is not all equal, so you get some good poets and some bad poets. But I think one of the really good things about this book is I think, all the poetry is very, very high quality, and they all sort of inform each other because they speak to different angles of, being inside San Francisco. So.
I'll also speak up. And I thought that when I first read it, I thought we're talking to each other. I really felt like that we were some kind of chorus, like a Greek chorus or something, honoring the city in all of its different arrays. And I just felt privileged. And when I went around to different bookstores, I would say, you've just got to put this in the window, because this has some really wonderful poems about the city. And I was just glad to belong, just felt privileged to be among you all.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what everyone else just brought up. I love the different perspectives that the poetry provided. And I have to share with you, I have a 93-year-old mother that I gave a copy to, and she's reading through it, and she calls me, she says, "Did you read this one? Luca Ravioli. We used to go there when I was a little girl." And Catherine, I see that you're nodding your head like Luca Ravioli. And my mother said, "This is like a slice of San Francisco." She's loving it. And that's, people see it from different perspectives based on your life experience. I know some people are immigrants here, and some people are natives, and we all have a different perspective. So I love the richness of the language that comes through, the different lenses that are offered here. It's a delightful piece of work, and to be part of it is such an honor. Yeah.
Yeah, and then to just comment on all of what you said, which is really, really important to me. Catherine, I saw this book like as a gathering of community and like a poetry party. That's how it felt to me. Stuart, I wanted the quality of every poem to be just really high, different voices, but really high. But it was very much about community rather than just one poet. And in terms of being a party, there are some editors who don't put their poems in the book because they feel, oh no, I shouldn't do that. This was not a party that I wanted to miss. I wanted to be there too. And one of the poets, we have kind of in the works, and there's something coming centering around New York, and which is about all I'm going to say. But if you think of the three cities that are really full of poetry, first three that come to mind are San Francisco, New York, and New Orleans. But and I don't know anybody in New Orleans, but I do know people in New York. And the person that is in the process of gathering that book didn't want to put his own work in because he just doesn't do that. And I got on the phone with him and said, you have to be in there. This is going to be an important book, and I really want you to be part of it. So I did sort of my chief editor, you know, I wouldn't have insisted, but I really knew that he needed to be in there. And, you know, in terms of community, we had to launch this book during the pandemic. You know, what I originally had in mind is doing large group readings at every bookstore in San Francisco. That was my original plan. With a previous anthology, River of Earth and Sky, we did the largest reading that bookstore has ever seen. And I just thought we're going to do this all over the city. And then pandemic and no reading. And what the poets as a community did during the launch was just astounding. I mean, people bought books, they told everybody they know. I mean, Elise Kazanjian, like over 40 of her friends bought books during the launch. I mean, I asked everybody to just, you know, get out there, put it on Facebook, tell all of your friends. And in less than 24 hours, we were #1 on the bestseller list in 2 different categories. And that's not something that one person can do. It's something that a group can do. And if Catherine and Kathy want to tell everyone what you did in Marin, that just so warmed my heart. You're good.
We just went to local bookstores and, you know, talked them into taking the book. It's such a beautiful book too to look at. As Kathy said, it should be displayed, right? Gorgeous picture of the bridge on, yeah.
And we had, you know, there are a couple of poets in the book that aren't alive anymore. Of course, you know, Ferlinghetti, Jane Underwood, but we had 60 poets who are alive, and they went to their favorite bookstores. They told their friends, and it was part of the party. It was just an astounding thing that happened very quickly. And by the way, the book is still on the bestseller list today. You know, it goes off and on now. It's been there for 11 weeks. And, you know, it just kind of went back on yesterday. I don't know whether it's because of this reading. It could be, because sometimes when we give a reading, it calls more attention to the book. And I want to thank you for that.
Well, and I want to say, when I was in Marin, I'd often go into the same store Catherine had been in. And then they had 6 copies, or, you know, they already had ordered it. So it was kind of fun to chug along with the people's interest in this book. It was in Sausalito. I went to Sausalito and said, this has just got to be in the window. You've got to put this. And they were really excited. They hadn't heard about the book yet. So it's fun to publicize it.
That's super. You know,
and it should go on. It should go on. Even the readings, and keep going, Diane, with the readings in the stores too. It's relevant.
We have more coming, and if you'll check your email, we've got one on the 9th of August that I'd like you to participate in. So, you know, get back to me about that. And, you know, there's going to be another reading at Burton Beckett, and any poets that are in the book, there's an open mic you can read. And if you're not in the book, the theme's going to be San Francisco. You can get to the Burton Beckett open mic. It's hosted by Kim Schick, and read your poems. So, but it was just.
Just to say, I love the poem in the book about Burton Beckett. There's a poem, I don't know who the author was, but it was one of the first ones I read, and it had it called attention to what was in the corner of the window in Burton Beckett. Do you remember that poem, Diane?
I do. I'd have to go through the table of contents right now because my mind is full with other things. Yeah. But it's in there, and I had to have a poem about Burton Beckett in there.
Yes, for sure. Good one.
And they're so author friendly. They take books by local poets. When they heard about our book, it was just right in there. Yeah.
Diane, what is the reading at Burton Beckett that you were just talking about?
Let me grab my thing, my calendar right here.
I'm going to suggest that you put those things into the chat so that we can all access them. The readings that you just mentioned, the Burton Beckett and the one before, that would be wonderful if we could have it in the chat.
Okay, maybe. I think I might ask Heather to do that again, just because I can't chat while I'm kind of working this way with an event, but it's 7 p.m. And it's hosted by Kim Shuck. And Heather is part of that reading.
And what's the date, Heather, for that reading?
It is August 9th.
Thank you.
August 9th, thank you. And thanks for indulging me, because there's just so many things I can do at one time. So Diane, did you have any other questions, or that you
Yes,
wanted
there's
to
one
ask her?
thing. There's one thing I've been curious about, and it may be something that none of you can answer, but I wonder how many poets in this book knew each other before the anthology, and how many more poets have you met by being part of this anthology? Because one of our big interests is the poetry community, growing the poetry community. And so just as you were all reading, I just thought, well, I'll ask them. Maybe they know. So.
Hey, go ahead.
So I knew three of the folks, and the rest were all folks that actually four, including you, Diane, Frank. So it was very interesting to read all of this other rich material from other poets. And it was kind of nice to know that I was among company that I had written with before. So that's my perspective on it. I didn't feel a need to know everybody, but it was nice to have some colleagues.
I'd say that I knew a few people, of course. I think I knew 3 or 4 people, and I recognized other people's names. And then I met a whole bunch of new people as well. So it's been a really good experience. And I think, like if we could be giving live readings, which hopefully will happen again soon, then of course we would be able to meet each other as we gave readings, which was a really cool thing with the first anthology, River of Earth. Diane, is that the one?
River of Earth and Sky.
Right. So that was a really great, event. Like I think you talked about that poetry reading in San Francisco that was so big. That was so much fun, and I think one of the benefits of that was, in fact, meeting a lot of the poets in the anthology. So, hopefully we'll get back to that soon.
I knew about 3/4 of the poets before. I mean, there's some poems and poets that I just said, we're doing this. I want this particular poem, or send me poems. But people find out about it. I didn't do this huge call because I didn't want to have to read thousands of poems. There were certain poets, but I was really open to other poets. And some people told their friends, people that I didn't know. Ellen Bass found out about it and sent it out to her community. So she sent a lot of poets who I hadn't read or heard of even to me. And then through these readings, I'm getting to know them, and it's just been a wonderful thing. So it's a collection of friends. There are all sorts of cross connections.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Did you put out a general call for submissions? But you already answered it. So that's amazing that it went out mostly by word of mouth, it sounds like.
Well, I put out a call to everyone that Blue Light Press had published. I contacted people that were well connected, like Tom Santalella told his community of friends, and it wasn't like people couldn't share it. So it did go beyond my initial call. And because you don't want 1,000-page book, so you can't have everybody in there.
No.
It doesn't mean that those poems aren't good. It just means that that's not this particular book. Catherine.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to say something a little off this topic that I've been thinking about a lot when I think about this book. And having grown up in the city and seeing it change a lot over the years, especially in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, I have a very sweet and sour feeling, about my city. It's still my city. And this book really helped me to reconnect to what I love about it, and just to not go to that sour side too much, because I know a lot of us San Franciscans can get very complainy about the things that are going on these days. But it really helped me to reconnect and realize my love, my care for my city, and to realize so many other people felt that way too. And it was, just on an emotional level, it felt really good to have these poems in this book about our city right now. So again, thanks to Diane for deciding to do that.
Well, that sweet and sour thing, you're not the only poet who feels that way. And I found that in a number of poems, because I really wanted to have all aspects of city life, what it used to be like, what it's become. There are poems about the symphony and the opera, and some really just special events and moments. And there are poems about the homeless and the BART station, and the Alison Luderman's poems. They'll flatten you emotionally. So I wanted the whole thing, not just what the tourists say.
Well, one of the things that, as a person who has never lived in San Francisco, that I have wondered, and of course I couldn't tell by reading the book, which of the poems were about things that were long past, just not there anymore, and which were still going. So did you feel that you were able to have kind of a spectrum of poems, some of which were about like way back, and as well as the ones that were more modern, like about things that still are going on, as opposed to things that disappeared in city development and that?
Very much so. I mean, we have Lynn Barnes' poems about the summer of love and her commune, at that time. There are a number of poems about the summer of love. We have Vince Gotera about his high school experiences here, and the Doggie Diner, which unfortunately is not here anymore. And Ferlin Getty's poem talks about a politician when he first moved to San Francisco in the 50s. So it runs the full range.
It's a great literary contribution, I think, to the city and the poets that have inhabited the city. I just felt like it was sort of a chain, and some of the individual experiences that came up, like Catherine's with the hill and the roller skate. And I mean, it was charming to see those hidden places and to feel that it ignited your own memories. Like the poem I pulled out today about the homeless man. I mean, I worked in the homeless community for a while, and I just kept thinking of, it was like a disco ball of all those images swirling, in a room, and seeing different aspects of the city and being connected to the different poets. And I really praise you for doing that. It's a good contribution. So.
I think the book came out at the right time as well, Diane, because I think the city, at least from my perspective, is the city is sort of under fire right now because of what's going on with the homeless, and of course people are having a hard time with what's going on with high tech and tech taking over the city. I mean, I feel like the city has been under fire. So I think this book came out at the right time, and because it's sort of like it reflects what's going on, of course, in terms of the good and the bad. But I think the timing was just right, because it does present the city in both its positive and negative aspects. So but as a result of that, at the end of the day, I think it really affirms what San Francisco is about. So that's very cool and a big accomplishment. So thank you again, Diane.
Well, thank you for saying that, because some of the changes are really heartbreaking, and I wanted to really have this book about what it is like and what it has been like. And the interesting thing, I got the idea, and Janice, you're next. I got the idea. I was having like a coffee and chai date with Mike Larson. He's a really good friend. He started the San Francisco Writers Conference, and he a very famous literary agent who I fortunately got to know, and he kind of took me under his wings. And Mike, he said, I've got an idea for you that no one has done yet. And he said, we need a book about the poets of San Francisco, a book written by the poets of San Francisco. And really, who better than the poets can let you know about San Francisco from the inside? And we were at Pete's on Venice, and he said, now let's go into Books Inc. And he said, the book is going to be right there. He showed me a table by the door, and it is in Books Inc. It's at the airport. I mean, it's all over the place.
That's wonderful. I'm seeing some hands go up. And while we still have some time left, I'd like to invite our listening audience to pose any questions that they might have. And Janice, I saw your hand go up. So do you have a question or?
Well, actually, I'm a native of San Francisco and a friend, I have to say, of Catherine Goldman, and was invited by her and was just totally blown away by this book. I studied poetry, writing poetry with Richard Silberg. I don't know if people remember or know Richard. He taught at UC Berkeley for a number of years. I am not a great poet. It is challenging to condense, a huge manuscript into the essential words. It's a difficult art form. So I commend everybody here. It's just beautiful writing. The other thing I wanted to point out, which I thought was really quite interesting, I have to say about Catherine Goldman's work, is the fact that she was one of the very few people that talked about the other San Francisco, the south of Market. San Francisco, as a native and an older person living in the city, a lot of people think of the city as north of Market, right? The major part of San Francisco. There was a huge swath of land and history south of Market. So I have to say, I really commend Catherine for that beautiful and really visceral discussion of the Third Street Cowboys. It just ripped me apart because it's so poignant to San Francisco's other city.
Thank you so much. And are there any other questions from the audience? Steve, do we have any that have come through from the live stream? Because that has a chat box attached to it as well.
No, it doesn't look like there were any questions that came through the.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, then it's about 5 minutes after 3, so we would have time for some more poems.
I would like to ask Heather Estes to read Tree number 143. I mean, you're here. You should read a poem.
Oh, thank you, Diane. I really am very honored to have some of my poems in this anthology. It's been a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. I'm very proud to be with some amazing colleagues. I'm a newbie. I'm an immigrant. I've been in the city for 15 years, grew up back east, and I'm still taken by the fog because I live in the inner sunset, which means, anyway. And this one, which I'm just so amazed by growing up in rural New England. Tree, number 143. In the city, number 1. In the city, even the trees have unique identifying numbers. Yesterday, a Monterey pine 3 feet across at its trunk was cut down. Trunk left lying in pieces too big for the chipper. The stump golden in the sunshine, damp and smelling of turpentine. 2, they are at it again next week. cutting down more trees. Chainsaws whine harsh as dental drills. What they do now can never be undone. I watch a slow motion car crash, bodies piled. And yet, when they are done on this small hill, my views of Pacific Ocean breakers, quartz sand flashes of the outer sunset will be grander, my vision greater and clearer. I am cut in half. Thanks.
Yeah, that poem really speaks to me, and it had to be in the book. I just want you to know that I love every single poem in this book, just lovingly gathered. And
Well, that has to be part of your editorial process, doesn't it? That you love each one.
That's kind of the number one criteria. I mean, there were things about the city that I wanted to express, and wanted to, make room for the poets to express. But I think, like for people sending poems out to publication, it's kind of like dating. You have to find a good match. And when something is right, you don't have to talk yourself into it. You just love that person, or you just love that poem. And it was just real clear what I had to put in the book. And that's true for every single poem in the book. And even with Ferlinghetti, that with the dog, it was the right poem to start the book, and I knew that it would set the right tone. It's the only poem in the book that I had to pay permissions for, but it was a good use of my money and new directions. The guy there that does permissions is really nice, and and he just made it easy to include that poem.
Yeah, that was a perfect one for that. Yeah.
I'd like to read one poem that's in the book that you said, well, how well did we know each other? And in the community of poets, we come across each other here and there. But I was quite taken with Carolyn Miller's poem, and maybe could just read it, called Things to Be Grateful For in San Francisco. Let me see. White crowned sparrows, flowering trees, firecracker paper, lion dancers, railroad flats, bay windows, pocket doors, bougainvillea stairway streets, tiled storefronts, witch-capped towers, electric buses, old streetcars, cable car bells, roller coaster hills, little houses inside city blocks, wild parrots, stratus clouds, salt, air, low blue fog, sourdough, espresso, sidewalk tables, Dungeness crab, pho, focaccia, bulgogi, gnocchi, moonrise over North Beach, moonlight on the bay. Little Valentine there to San Francisco.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I think the whole book is a Valentine to San Francisco, and I'm really glad you read that one. We could just go around from poet to poet and share a poem, whether it's yours or someone else's, what you'd like to share, just one at a time.
Diane, I'd like to read one by Angie Minkin, because she's in my little group that we meet once a month, and I just love this. It's the Ode to Luca Ravioli. And I'm going to tap into your expertise. This is a particular structure that Kathleen McClure was teaching. And of course, because my short-term memory is failing me, I can't remember the structure, but there's something about repeating the lines. And as I read it, it's the line about the beautiful Italian men. Ode to Luca Ravioli. My kids grew up at Luca Ravioli, that quintessential deli in San Francisco's Mission. Beautiful Italian men tended to them carefully. They toddled there on fat legs, hair all blowy, sat on counters, drooled at stunning food compositions. My kids grew up full at Luca Ravioli. So many dinners of pasta and sauce for our family, pancetta, prosciutto, parmigiano, Beautiful Italian men fed us all so carefully. 94 years on the same corner. The place is almost holy. No useless shops then, no tech bros making acquisitions. My kids grew up innocent at Luca Ravioli. 94 years over and gone, the holy ground will be wholly disturbed. Overpriced condos, $12 juices, San Francisco's new religion. Those beautiful Italian men left us bereft, carefully sent packing. Luca's closed today. It filled slowly with distraught locals. No one had asked our permission. My kids grew up loving and happy at Luca Ravioli. Beautiful Italian men tended to them so carefully. I just love that.
That's lovely. Oh.
Hey, Diane, I'd be happy to read one of Tom's poems because
Please.
he's one of my, well, he probably is my oldest friend in San Francisco, and I love his work. And so I'd like to take the opportunity to do that. So I'll read one of his poems from the book. This is Tom Santanella's, one of Tom Santanella's poems. It's called Past 60. And I think this poem also really, it's like it also reflects a part of San Francisco that I think tourists see, but it has, I think, a deeper meaning for the people who live here. Past 60. Higher and higher, the cable car ascends the tallest hill, and I know what the first timers don't. After the crest, the precipitous plunge, steep as death. But first, the charming restaurants and cafes, and no end of handsome, obscenely priced houses, shuttered to the plum trees, brightening the streets. Higher and higher, camera phones framing the view, all of them useless once we peak and roll over the edge and gather speed, the fine line between excitement and danger obliterated, the brakeman tugging fiercely the worn brass of his handle, almost in desperation, every part of his body a form of applied force. Though it feels like a downrush to oblivion with all the odds against him, no one would call it heroic. Yet it's impressive how he's doing his best to keep us intact as well as entertained, slow us down, keep us on track, the way of his workday, which for me now, I got here so fast, is every day.
Really glad you read that one. Tom is also my oldest friend in San Francisco. We knew him from Syracuse, knew him from Iowa. Catherine.
Catherine, would you like to read one?
I have a short poem that is in my other collection, Jazz and Other Hot Subjects, that I thought would be nice because it celebrates our ocean in San Francisco. It's called October. Turns us gently towards darkness, laying cool hands on our backs. Black jacketed riders pour like a string of loud beads onto the great highway. A surfer pitches himself into churning foam, thousands of soft hammers erasing him. And cars in their clenched jaw direction, and gulls beating a steady course for fish or garbage, and the woman in the red parka trudging along, mouth slightly open, a faraway smile, rhythm enough to carry us.
Oh,
Love that poem. Thank you.
That's lovely.
Bravo.
We've all, I think, stood at the wall there and looked at the ocean and watched the people and, spent so much time there in my life. And I bet the rest of you have too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a poem by Jane Underwood. Jane she started the writing salon. We published a book by her posthumously, but it was well in the works while she was still here. And Jane and I were in San Francisco State at the same time, and we formed a group of 4 poets who were like really into each other's writing. It wasn't about ego. It was in service to the poem, not in service to someone's idea about how a poem should be. And She was also my neighbor in Noe Valley when her son was born. So this is Umbilical, 1983. I labored on the old yellow couch, a shade of mustard I'll never forget, and pushed until my face flushed red with the blood we shared. On the wall above my head, a painting by Modigliani, a woman who resembled me except for her eyes, which were closed as if she slept, set apart from all the bliss, the mess. It was October, the sunniest room of the house, where back door opened onto apples and belly muscles turned inside out. When your head finally crowned and you, my son, were stupendously born, umbilical cord cut, yet not, leaves churning, spinning beyond the window, light playing at the edges of spider lace curtains until it too broke through to rapture.
Thank you so much. We probably have time for one or two more poems.
If I can, I'd be happy to jump in with a sort of a light poem that also I think characterizes San Francisco. Might just might be a fun poem to read. The poem is called Cell Phone, and this actually happened on a Muni, and probably some of you can identify with this as well. Just all the stories and the humor and the sadness also that you can overhear when you're on a traveling through a bus in San Francisco. This poem is called Cell Phone. The woman on the packed bus is sure all of us are interested in her latest shopping spree. Lingerie at half price, silk blouses of steel. How much she loved the new Woody Allen movie, the awful dinner party she attended the night before. When I tap her shoulder to tell her we've heard enough, she turns around but doesn't see me. Perhaps she thinks someone is encouraging her to tell us more, so she calls her boyfriend and tells him no, it was all her fault, but maybe it's time to call things off. Novels begin to close, newspapers fold as her words circulate through the bus. All of us now the boyfriend, eager to acknowledge a dread of commitment.
Anyone else? One more? Floor's open.
I'll do one more.
Sorry, I froze there. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sure I missed something good. Yes, we have time for maybe one or two more. Yeah, we're not sure what happens if we come to the end of the scheduled Zoom meeting and we're still talking. So I want to make sure we wrap up early. But one or two more, sure.
I have another one from Fog and Light. And I think one of the blessings of this book is its timing. We've talked about that already, but being that some of the poems were written during the pandemic and to have gotten it in our arms during the pandemic, I think it helped us. Some of us have had a more intimate experiences with our city than we might have otherwise because of that. San Francisco, 14th Avenue. Back from coffee, electric car silent, I always slow in the middle of the one-way road looking over outer sunset and the Pacific Ocean. I search the far horizon for the jagged teeth of the Farallones. A sailboat perches on teal blue water where trawlers fish at night. Cloudy mornings catch a current's silver edge. Sky ribbons of smoke gray, pewter, indigo. Whitecaps churn the sea, the hush of wave crash. The expanse of ocean is in perpetual conversation with the mutable sky. In unexpected urban quiet, I pause on the narrow overlook, thirsty for salt air and freedom.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
I have one more poem I'd like to share. It's an I've just published book while listening to the Enigma Variations. It was just published by Glasslyre Press on January 1st. And I have a poem that I wrote during a concert at the San Francisco Symphony. That's one of my habits. Because I'm a cellist and music is a really important part of my life. I like to go to concerts at the San Francisco Symphony. If I'm really inspired, I'll write on the program. If I don't understand what I'm hearing, which can happen in a lot of new music concerts, I'll also just let images come so I can try to enter the piece somehow. But anyhow, I wrote this during a concert of Brahms' German Requiem. It was 3 weeks after my stepmom ascended. She was Italian Catholic. She wanted a mass. She was the last of my of my 3 surviving parents, and things just happened so fast. You know, my brother put her on a plane. She flew to New Jersey. She was met by her niece. They did a little ceremony and they put her in the ground. So when I found out that they were doing the German Requiem, which is such a beautiful piece, Brahms wrote it for his mother, I just decided, hey, Edie, this is your Requiem. I arrived to usher really early so I could be in the orchestra. I was prepared for a meltdown. I had my ushering bag filled with tissues. But when the orchestra started tuning up, I began to see and feel amazing things. Requiem for Edie. The door opens on Tuesday. On Friday, she walks away from the world. I saw them at the symphony, Brahms and 100 voices around them. He was wearing a black suit with a top hat. She in a long silk evening gown, his arms softly around her shoulder. They waved at me from a high window, and then they walked into the stars. Nobody else could see them, but they waved at me from a high box in the air. In the fortissimo, low pedal tones of the organ vibrated the ceiling and the walls. And in the quiet moments, 100 voices hummed the chord of the earth as it turned. In another world, she is skating on a river in the rose pink of sunset or dawn. A fox fur hat around her face keeps her warm, sheltering her as a cottonwood tree from thunder. These memories comfort as a soft pillow, green and cool, a meadow glowing with wild irises and daffodils, the path through the forest where you walked, where the leaves of your life glow like rhapsodies at your feet.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diane.
That was beautiful.
Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today, Diane and Catherine and Kathy and Catherine and Stuart. And for all of you who are Zooming with us and who are joining us on YouTube. The recording of today's event will be posted on our website soon. So please consider joining us at Coastside Poetry on August 10th, our next regularly scheduled second Tuesday event, when at 6 p.m. we welcome San Francisco poet Kathleen McClung. Thanks again for joining us at Coastside Poetry and for helping to keep the lamps of poetry burning.